Welcome back to Preservation Travels. Today we're just outside of Natchez and we're bringing you the Mount Repose Plantation, built in 1824. This home was built for John Bisland, the son of William Bisland, who settled in the Pine Ridge community in 1776. The same family lived in this home until just the previous owner, and it is so full of rich history and amazing architecture. So come along as I take you on a tour of the architectural past of this exquisite home. This home has an incredible evolution over its last 200 years. And we're going to start out here in the front, and we're going to learn all about the architectural past and its evolution, starting right here. This home started as a single pile, 5-bay federal home. What does single pile mean? That means it was one room deep. That's all it was. 2.5 story. So across the front, we have 5 bays. What do 5 bays mean? That means there are 5 holes in the front of the house. 2 sets of windows and a front door. Fenestration is the window placement of the home. You'll see the column placement across the front. These are very simple boxed columns with molded tops and plain bases. They're the same on the top and the bottom galleries. You'll notice the top gallery has a railing, the bottom gallery does not. We think the top hand railing was probably a replacement to an earlier railing. This has a very Greek Revival design on a very Federal period house, and we know that this home got a Greek Revival update in the 1840s. So we suspect this was part of that trendy update. You'll see that the 2 front doors are exactly the same in design, except the upper door is shorter, and that is to accommodate the shorter ceiling height upstairs. Federal design had as its fundamental principle symmetry. So if there were 2 windows on one side, there had to be 2 windows on the opposite side. The front doors needed to match. And of course, notice the glorious fan light that sits on top of that front door. The beautiful side lights, much of it containing its original wavy glass. Let's take a closer look at some of these details, and then we'll go inside and see what treasures are in there. Welcome inside the Center Hall of Mount Repose. This is going to be one of those tours where you get a lot of architectural education. But I know a lot of you are going to be tempted to message us and say, I couldn't keep up with the floor plan. It seems so disjointed. I got all confused. I want to remind you, the home was built in 1824 and evolved for the next 40 years with addition after addition after addition. So even for us, standing in the home, it feels a little confusing and flow, but that just shows you its evolution over time and is part of the beauty of these old houses. So don't get frustrated if you get confused, just enjoy the ride and what we have to show you. Let's start in this front hallway. Take a look first, if you will, at the beautiful plaster work on the ceiling. This plaster work is done in situ. It's not done with the normal technique that we're accustomed to seeing, where plaster work is molded and then applied to the ceiling, which would come along about 50 years later here in this region. This plaster is actually applied to the ceiling, and then the design is carved into the plaster. So the entire perimeter of this room, showing this 3 raised fluted design and the 3/4 empty circle edge, along with the medallion in the center, is all done in place when the plaster is being applied. It's one of my favorite elements. Now, right now I'm standing in part of the front hall that would have been the original center hall. But if I back up to right here, I'm now at what would have been the end of the original home. The second part of the house was added just a few years after the first part of the home was built. Other things to note in this front hallway that are just typically Federal period. We have this pinwheel foliated design on each of our corner blocks, along with this beautiful beveled molding. Absolutely stunning. And you have your original wainscot, low wainscot that is reeded all the way around the room. It mimics the design in the door. You have complete agreement of all your details. Something else I want to point out, our front door and our back door are stylistically very different. Our front door is early Federal with the Palladian style light. Our back door is later Federal with the side lights and the square transom over the top. And you'll notice on close inspection, even the entablature and architrave, though similar, are different. The fluting on the pilasters on the door are dissimilar from one another. So stylistically, they're in agreement, but you can see the difference in age one to the other. Now we're going to go into what would have been the formal family's receiving parlor that's now serving as a main bedroom. How do we know that this is the formal receiving parlor? Well, all we have to do is look upward. The same plaster work that is applied to the ceiling in the entryway is applied to the ceiling in here. And we don't find that in the parlor opposite this room. So we know that this room would have been the room that the Bisland family would have received callers in. It would have been used for formal visiting occasions. Around the windows and doors, we have the same entablatures and architraves. The corner blocks again have the foliate pinwheel design. And underneath our beautiful windows, we have these molded panels that are very indicative of the period. You'll note that in this room, instead of a beautiful Federal mantelpiece that we would expect, we have these black Egyptian marble mantles that we see all over Natchez and the Adams County area. These were part of the trendy 1840s update, the Greek Revival update this home received. We have them in our own home, Hope Farm, and you see them again and again and again here in Natchez. We lost a lot of Federal architecture during that period, but one of these original mantles survives in another area of the house, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Now we're going to walk through to an adjoining what is being used as a dressing room, and then into a third room that's part of the 1840s Greek Revival expansion. In the 1840s, 2 additions were placed, one on the east side, one on the west side here at Mount Repose. They are done in the Greek Revival style. You'll see Greek Revival elements on the exterior of these 2 additions, as well as the interior, and you can see it very clearly here. If you'll take a look at the windows, the entablatures and architraves in the corner blocks. Very simplistic in this room because this wasn't a public space, but we have wide entablatures and architraves, and our corner blocks become pyramidal in design. So we start to see that Greek Revival influence in this room. Right off of this room, we have a large bathroom, and that's the conclusion of the tour of this side of the home. Now let's go to the west side of the home, and I'll show you what happened over there over time. All right, we've crossed the hall and we've come into what would have been the family's sitting room. You'll notice that this room is slightly larger than the formal receiving room across the hall. This is because this is the space in which all of the day-to-day family business would have occurred in 1824. All of the sewing, the mending, the journal writing, the correspondence probably would have happened in this space, so you needed a large room to do that. You'll notice no ornamentation on the ceiling in here. We didn't need high style, high decoration for a private space. However, we do still have the beautiful molded panels underneath the windows and gorgeous glass throughout the room. Again, another 1840s Black Egyptian marble mantelpiece in this room. We have a very special element in this room, and it's one that I've not seen again in Natchez. I'm not saying there isn't another. I'm just saying I haven't had the pleasure of seeing one, and that is a cast iron fire back. It appears to be original to the firebox. It is purely federal in design with these beautiful elliptical fan shapes. But I want to draw your attention to a little detail. It has a design that mimics very closely that pinwheel foliate design that we also see in the corner blocks of this room. So similar design elements being used throughout the room to tie the design together. You'll see behind me one of the only pieces of furniture that's been in this house for any length of time. When the previous owners left the home, they took with them all of the pieces that had been in this home for generations, save the mirror behind me, and it will stay for the new caretakers of this home. We're in a sitting room that's just behind that family gathering space. This is part of the second build date at Mount Repose, part of that expansion from a single pile to a double pile. I want to draw your attention to this mantelpiece. This is the mantelpiece style that you're going to see in the rest of the expansion period in formal spaces, so non-public spaces. It is very Greek Revival in design. But it's early Greek Revival. You have these simple pilasters on the fireplace, but this arch in the opening is carrying us into that Greek Revival period along with this serpentine top. So let's go now to the dining space that pulls us into the height of Greek Revival design here at Mount Repose. Well, now I'm coming through that doorway from the main family parlor that we were just in into what is now the dining room. I want to draw your attention to the doorway behind me. Do you see that transom window that sits at the top of that doorway? That's fully indicative of the fact that that was originally an exterior door. There is a similar door on the opposite side before you enter into the expansion wing on that side. That indicates that those transoms would have originally been used to open up to allow airflow through the house in this direction. So these are your original exterior doors. But now we are in the Greek Revival eastern portion of this home. Absolutely stunning room. But look at this mantelpiece. This is a federal mantle, as classic federal as it can be. Now, there's not a lot of ornamentation on it. The pilasters are fluted beautifully, but there's not a lot of detail on what we would consider a keystone here in the middle. You'll see a lot of detail on that on the federal mantles upstairs. So this indicates to me that this was probably the mantelpiece that was in the private family room because we would not have had as much ornamentation. But let's look at the details in the rest of this room. They are pure Greek Revival. I want to draw your attention to the entablatures and architraves around the windows and the corner blocks. Here we see the introduction of a Greek key design. And again, we have those pyramidal corner blocks that are different than the small, petite, delicate, foliated pinwheel corner blocks that we have in the federal portion of this house. But the proportion of this room is absolutely stunning. So have a look around with me. So this is fun. This is one of those elements I was telling you about that really speak to the importance of symmetry in federal, Palladian, Greek Revival architecture. If you had one window, you would have had a second window. If you had a door, you would have had a second door. This shows us that at one point, there was another window or door here. Something has happened here with an addition. And I'm certain that this was not just done stylistically. You will see in some homes elements added stylistically just to give the illusion of symmetry. I really don't feel like this is the case. I feel like this was originally a window or a door, and at some point this wall has been extended or added so that we've lost this element, but we've kept our molding, so it's fun to see. Something else in this room that's probably not going to be very clear to you on the video, but is very interesting to me. For almost 200 years, the same family lived in this home, and the same pieces of decorative art were in this home. And there was an original oil floor cloth that sat in this room for truly 10 decades or longer. And this floor retains the stain from where that floor cloth was. So we can see darker on the outside from foot traffic and from sun exposure, and where that floor cloth was down for over 100 years,
The wood is much, much, much lighter. I also want to call to your attention the fact that in that front hall and in the front rooms, we have pine floors that have been placed over the original cypress. But in this part of the house, we've gone just to pine because we've gotten into that Greek revival period where Natchez has transitioned from using cypress to using pine in its construction. Let's take a look at the kitchen. Well, now you've had a look at the beautiful modern kitchen that we have to have in these 200-year-old homes so that we can function and live in them in a modern world. But an original element that's in here, probably from the 1840s update, is this beautiful mantelpiece. It matches all of the others from that later 1840s edition time. You'll see the style. They ordered several of the same mantles, and here one is that's been here all of that time, giving that taste of history to a modern space. Behind us in the kitchen is a new addition built on for modern living and comfort that includes a family room, a mudroom, and a huge laundry space. This is that back room behind the formal receiving room that's part of that just slightly after 1820s addition, making it a two-pile design. You'll see that same mantle design that we saw on the opposite side of the house, only in this room it's slightly larger. You'll notice that these rooms are much more simplistic in style and design. There is a low chair rail, very simple mantle pieces, and smaller rooms built to add private family living space to this home as the family grew. We've just come up that beautiful curving staircase at the back of the front hall and taken time to enjoy the beautiful profiles of those newel posts, both on the first and second floor landing. And now we're in this wide center hall overlooking the front grounds and the gorgeous live oaks through the front door that mimics that on the gallery below. Let's go into the first of the original bedrooms and take a look at the original elements that are still in there. Now remember downstairs when I showed you the mantle that's in the dining room, and I said it's an early federal mantle, but I don't think it's stylistically high design enough to have been the one in the formal receiving parlor. This is one of the reasons why. This would have been part of the original build of the home, but this would have been a purely private space. This would have been a bedroom for the family. And you'll see, again, it retains its period mantelpiece. And you see this reeded design on the center here and reeded design on the cap of the pilasters. This is very simple, but still higher in style than the one that we saw downstairs. So that's what makes me think that the one that now lives in the dining room is the one that would have been in the private family room. Wish I knew what happened to that one that was in the formal receiving parlor. You'll notice behind me too, there's a doorway into the first addition. You'll see at the top of that doorway, another transom, indicating that this would have been an exterior door that transom could have been opened to allow the hot air rising to the ceiling to escape and allow some air circulation up here. So let's just move on back into that addition space and have a look around. We've come across the hall to the secondary bedroom of the first build period, another monumental space. These are absolutely enormous bedrooms. And I again want to draw your attention to the fact that we have a matching mantelpiece on this side of the house. So the two mantelpieces were symmetrical. They're in the same position and they match one another. Behind this space, the addition has been converted into a huge bathroom. So you have a huge bedroom with a large bath on this side of the hall. Now we're going to go upstairs to the third half story that exists, and I'm going to show you some really interesting things. We're in the third half story. Now, these spaces were very important in these early homes. We've talked about the fact that Mount Repose was a plantation. Unfortunately, we don't have any of the names of the enslaved workers who lived and worked here. When we do, we like to share those with you and share their stories with you, but unfortunately, we don't have any. But what we do have is part of the space where the enslaved who worked in the home probably lived. Of course, if you had enslaved body servants, you wanted them close to you 24 hours a day. So this third floor space, which indicates it's always been finished. Look at the beauty of the handrail, The delicacy of the turned newel post here on the 3rd floor shows that this always would have been a functioning, finished space. But there are some things up here that I find especially interesting. There are some things that are just odd and intriguing, but then there's something that I find really interesting. Now, I may be way off. This may be a 20th century doodle by a child at Christmas. I don't know. But there are some markings on the doorway into what would have been a private bedroom, more than likely for an enslaved house servant. These, to me, bear a striking resemblance to the markings that are on the ends of the pews at the First African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia, that were made by enslaved workers, and they inscribed their names in their native language on the ends of those pews. And to me, these pictographs, these pictures, these markings bear a striking resemblance to those, and they're done in the same way. It's almost a relief out of the stain. The stain is simply absent. It's not carved in. It doesn't look like it's been marked on. The stain is just not present. So it's probably nothing. This is purely conjecture. It's just part of the fun of investigating a house and putting a piece from one investigation together with a piece from a later investigation. But if this were my house, I would certainly find someone to come and at least take a look at these and tell me how very wrong I am.
Well, of all of the architectural wonders here at Mount Repose, the most fantastic to me is the hexagonal original 1824 dependency. Now, it has been speculated that this building has served as a smokehouse, a dairy, or potentially even the original kitchen. However, I think the original kitchen is on the other side, and we'll show you that here in just a second. But whatever its intended purpose originally, it is the only original dependency standing. Now it's been turned into a bedroom, and it is absolutely a spectacular space. The 24 acres on which this property sits is filled with other buildings. However, none of those are original, and they're all late 19th, early 20th century buildings, some of which were built here, some of which were moved here. Now let's briefly talk about another question that I know people are going to have. People are going to ask, where are the slave dwellings? Why are they not here? And they're going to assume that they were torn down out of some sense of shame or anger. That's simply not the case. There are no extant slave dwellings here at Mount Repose, but that doesn't mean there were never any. But what you have to remember is that after the American Civil War, when the enslaved were emancipated, there was no more use for those structures. The South was also plunged into a time of great economic depression from which it would not emerge until really after the Great Depression of the 20th century. And so buildings that had no practical purpose anymore simply were not kept up. They were allowed to fall apart and disappear back into the landscape, or their materials were scavenged and salvaged and used to maintain the home that the family was living in. So there are no extant slave structures here on Mount Repose. Now let's talk about this little brick structure behind me. As we wound our way through the new family room addition, the new laundry room addition, you'll notice that we passed through a very simple brick room with a fireplace. It is my suspicion that this is an early detached kitchen. The proximity to the dining room makes it make sense as a kitchen. The build style, the materials used, all of it make it appear to me to be an early, if not original kitchen, possibly a kitchen built in that Greek revival update period. This is Dijon. He's my filming buddy today. Thank you for joining us on Preservation Travels with Lane and Kevin here at our Restoration Nation. We hope you've enjoyed this, no doubt, rather lengthy tour of Mount Repose, but how do you make it anything but lengthy when there is 200 years of history right at your fingertips? Now, we want to remind you, we are not real estate agents. However, Mount Repose is for sale. So if you think you'd like to be the next caretaker of this incredibly important historic home, the 24 acres on which it sits, and the incredible collection of live oaks on the ground. We'll put the Zillow link in the description below where you can get in touch with the realtor. Thank you so much for being with us. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more information like this and watching us do our own restoration projects. And we'll see you next time on Preservation Travels with Lane and Kevin.